There's a lot of YouTube videos that talk with you about going into the penitentiary, and they focus a lot of times on the gangs and the violence and the negativity that prisons breed. I mean, there's no secret. The longer we expose people to corrections in the United States, the less likely people are to emerge successfully outside. My name is Michael Santos, and when I was 23 years old, I was charged with leading a cocaine enterprise as a kingpin. The actual charge is Title 21, Section 848, known as continuing criminal enterprise. It's not a very complicated charge, really. It has three elements. Prosecutors have to prove three elements. One, the individual, to be convicted of a kingpin statute, has to manage or control or supervise 5 or more people. There has to be 3 or more overt acts. What's an overt act? So, for example, if Jim and I decide to traffic in cocaine, and I say, okay, Jim, here's what we need to do. We need to build a machine that will allow other people to transport the cocaine and sell it so we don't get caught. That conversation alone is not yet a conspiracy. It's not yet a crime. It becomes a crime when you take one act in furtherance of the conspiracy. So let's say that Jim calls the Fontainebleau Hotel and says, hey, can we book a hotel room so that we could send some people there to stay there? If we booked that hotel room or even made that call, that's an overt act in furtherance of the conspiracy. If I rented a car for somebody to drive the cocaine from Miami to Seattle, that's an overt act. If I rented an apartment to store things in, that's an overt act. Those 3 things is what leads to solving the elements of a crime for this particular crime, continuing criminal enterprise. The third element is there has to be substantial amounts of money. Now, that's an arbitrary number. I mean, for some people, $1,000 is a substantial amount of money. If that's what the jury finds is a substantial amount of money, fine. I sold a lot of cocaine when I was 20 years old. I wasn't thinking, I didn't know what I was doing in the sense of I was exposing myself to a far more serious charge. With the wisdom of a 20-year-old, I thought that if I didn't touch the cocaine, if I didn't handle it, I wasn't really breaking the law. Turns out I was really not very bright in navigating those things. And that's one thing I would recommend that all of you do. If you're facing challenges with the criminal justice system, visit all of the free content that I make available at prisonprofessors.org. All of it is free. I believe that everybody should learn about the journey ahead so that they can make better decisions, certainly better decisions than I made. The best time to avoid going into prison is before you commit a crime. But if you've committed a crime, you really want to learn as much as you can. The good news is it's never too early and never too late to start building a pathway to success and restoring your dignity and your pathway that's going to lead you to a better life. There are always more opportunities in the future than in the past, but only for people who are willing to do the work. If you're willing to do the work, I will give you the work for free at prisonprofessors.org. But you got to do it. You got to educate yourself about what's going on in the system and then figure out what you can do to make the best possible outcome. I was arrested on August the 11th, 1987, and they blocked me in solitary confinement because I had this kingpin charge. I didn't have any violence in my case, but I was facing life in prison. And this was the dawn of the war on drugs. This is the time when Nancy Reagan was on those commercials. For those of you who are over 40, I guess, maybe remember those commercials that said, just say no to drugs. I didn't just say no. I instead tried to evade the law, and I paid a very big price for that. When I got arrested, they put me in solitary confinement where I spent the first year, which means I'm locked in a box. Right? I can't communicate with other people. It's very loud in there because there's a lot of commotion going on in the hole, but it's a dehumanizing experience. I did not know anything different because I'd not been incarcerated before, so I just thought that was what prison was about. Eventually, I was not only convicted, a judge sentenced me to 45 years, and soon thereafter, the marshals transported me to the penitentiary, a penitentiary on the East Coast, thousands of miles away from my family. Because when I went to prison, there were only about 35,000 people in federal prison. It was a much smaller agency. There were only about 7 penitentiaries. And the reason I had to go to the penitentiary is because at that time, the custody and classification system told us that anybody who had more than 25 years to serve had to start in a penitentiary. So When I got there, it's the most violent federal prison in the nation. It's the step-down unit from Marion, which at that time was the equivalent of the ADX, which is today's Supermax. So I am learning about prison by walking around the track with other people, and people are telling me how to adjust. You gotta, forget about the world outside and focus on your life inside. And, you can't let anybody disrespect you. And, you gotta run with your own kind. And I didn't even know what kind I was, right? I'm an American citizen and I've never been racial. And I'm just an American, right? So I'm learning all these things about prison that just don't comport with what I want to become as a man. You got to be a man. If you're a man, you got to be a man. If you're a woman, you got to be a woman. You got to be the CEO of your life. And you got to figure out, are you going to adjust in the manner that other people are telling you to adjust and take what comes with it, or are you going to adjust on your own? Well, I hated being in prison. I'd been there for a long time, and although I'd been in solitary confinement for a year, so by the time I got to the pen, I'd already had my taste of being in confinement. The woman I was with had left me. I lost all my money. Didn't have a good relationship with the law firm that represented me. My grandparents wouldn't speak to me. It was just a terrible time. But I had a path, and that's what I want everybody who's a member of the prison professors community to develop: a path that can lead you to a better life. And you've got to be the owner of that path. Don't let other people in prison tell you what you can be. You've got to determine what you can be. I remember after being there for a month or so, I have this thing called a team meeting, where I'm sitting with a case manager and a counselor and a unit manager, and they're telling me all what I have to do in prison and how to survive, a bunch of nonsense, because it's my job to figure out how to survive. It's my job to figure out the best possible outcome. But by then I had heard about these other kinds of prisons, like federal correctional institutions and low security prisons and minimum security prisons. And I asked, hey, is there anything I can do to get to one of those lower security prisons? And I remember the unit manager, because he spoke to me, I'm in the South. So, Mr. Santos, you got 45 years from the federal government, and these penitentiaries are built just for people like you, and you should expect to serve all of your time in the penitentiary, and it's like, that's the system, right? It obliterates hope. It tells you that regardless of what good you can do in the future, we're only going to look at you for what bad you've done in the past. And that to me is un-American. But I had my plan. By then I had a plan. I'm going to spend my time in here getting an education. I'm going to spend my time in here finding ways to contribute in meaningful, measurable ways to society. And 3, I'm going to find a pathway to build a strong support network. And if I'm going to make a decision any day, it's going to either lead me closer to those 3 goals, or it's going to send me farther away. And if it's going to send me farther away, I'm not going to do it. So that influenced where I worked, what books I read, what friends I chose, what I did with my time. And that's what I would recommend anybody who's going into this system. Figure out how to be the CEO of your life, and then engineer a pathway to success. Don't wait for anybody in the system to change your life. That's like going to the barber and asking him if you need a haircut, okay? You've got to know what you need to do. You got to know what you want. I knew that if I got 1 degree, it would put me on the pathway to get another degree. If I earned another degree, it would put me on pathway to developing better relationships and mentors in my life. If I develop more mentors and relationships in my life, maybe I can build income streams that can sustain me, not only while I'm in prison, but when I get out. If I can do that, I'm going to have a better future. What is the future that you are going to engineer? It all starts today. It's never too late, and it's never too early to start preparing for success. I'll tell you, about 20 years, 18, 19 years into my sentence, well, I remember there's a guy I knew. His name was Gaylord. I don't know what kind of name that is, but his first name was Gaylord. And I was with him we were together in the pen, and he had a sentence that was not quite as long as mine. And he was one of these guys that you say, why you spend so much time studying and so on? You got a lot of time, And I got 20 years later, I get transferred to a minimum security camp. And the first camp I go to is in Florence, Colorado at the Supermax. So there's the Supermax is a complex, which means there's the Supermax, the ADX, there's the adjacent USP, high security penitentiary. Next to that is an FCI, a federal correctional institution, which is medium security. And then there's the minimum security camp, right? For me, when I get to a minimum security camp, I'd already been in prison for, 20 years, 18 years. So it was just amazing freedom. They gave me a job at the ADX. I worked in the laundry. And to get to the laundry, I'd have to board a bus, get on the bus at like 4 in the morning, drive over to the ADX, wait outside of a gate, okay? And one gate would open, and then you'd go into that gate, and then that gate would close behind you, and then another gate would open, and you'd walk into the pen. That's called the Sally Port. And it's where they bring the buses into the pen. And anytime they were bringing a bus into the ADX, everything would go on lockdown. Everything would stop. So I remember one day, I'm sitting on the bench outside that bench, and outside that gate, that Sally Port, and I see a bus come in. I know I'm stuck here for 45 minutes or so, and it's cold in Florence, Colorado this time of year. And I look at that bus, and I can't help but feel empathy for those guys that are on that bus, because I know they're going into a very difficult. I did my first year in solitary, but I don't want to go back. These guys are going into solitary confinement for at least 5 years, and some of them for the rest of their term, because they did something in prison that resulted in administrators wanting to put them there. So I go to work, and I'm in a laundry, and the way my job was is, we get a list of all the names of the people that are sending their laundry, and I'm looking at this name, and who do I see? Gaylord. He was on that bus. And I'm thinking to myself, what? How is it that 18 years ago we were together in the federal pen, and he had a release date that was far less than mine, but now I'm going to the camp, getting ready to go home, and he's coming in here. He's coming into the ADX. That's the dangers of prison. You make decisions in prison that will either advance you on your pathway to success, or may advance you in prison politics, and there will be a price that you may have to pay for that. You want to make sure that you're making decisions that will lead to your success. I know that anybody could do what I did, but it will not happen by accident, and it will not happen by happy talk. You have got to be the CEO of your life. And that's what we teach at prisonprofessors.org. We're a nonprofit. We don't generate revenues. We give everything away for free because we genuinely want to work to change the system, to incentivize a pathway to excellence and success. We know that it's difficult in prison because there aren't a lot of learning resources, so we offer them for free. We collaborate with high net worth individuals and with businesses, and we try and raise support so that there is no barrier to educational materials. I don't claim to be a great teacher. I'm just a guy that served a quarter century in prison. But I made a few $1 million since I've come home, and I feel a real duty and a responsibility to share as much as I possibly can with my brothers and sisters in prison so that you could work to reaching your highest potential, whether it's as a janitor or as it's a plastic surgeon. We want to remove the collateral consequences that follow a criminal conviction. We want to create more pathways to earn freedom. And if you want to be a part of the community, reach out to us at prisonprofessors.org. Everything is free. Follow us on YouTube, follow us on social media channels, share us with your attorney, or just reach out. We're here to assist. My main focus is on changing the system. I don't do individual consultations or anything of that sort because that's not scalable. I've got to work to change the system. But our sponsor does offer these interactive webinars every week, and you can participate and share your story or ask your questions. Just visit whitecollaradvice.com/nonprofit. Everything is free. I am Michael Santos. I'm the founder of Prison Professors, and I just want to say, I believe in you. Be cool.